Arjun sat hunched over his small wooden desk, papers scattered like fallen leaves after a storm. Lines of equations, half-written essays, and scribbled reminders filled every corner of his notebook, but none of it made sense to him anymore. His mind was louder than the room, a constant storm of doubts and questions. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail again? What if all this effort leads to nothing? Each thought pressed down on him like a stone, until his chest felt heavy and his head fogged with confusion. The lamp above his desk flickered, casting restless shadows that seemed to echo his mood. He gripped his pen tighter, as if forcing himself to write would push the anxiety away, but the page remained nearly blank, mocking him with its emptiness. The door creaked softly, and his mentor stepped inside. The old man carried with him no books, no instructions, just the calm air of someone who had lived through many storms. His eyes settled on Arjun, noticing the slump in his shoulders, the restless tapping of his foot, the deep crease between his brows. Without saying a word, the mentor walked to the low table near the desk and set down a simple clay teapot and 2 small cups. The soft clink of the ceramic broke the silence. Arjun glanced up, confused, and whispered, "Master, I don't have time for tea. I need to focus. I'm already behind." The mentor gave no reply. Instead, he began to pour. The golden liquid flowed gently into Arjun's cup, the faint steam rising with a soothing aroma. Arjun's eyes followed the stream of tea as the cup filled. He expected his mentor to stop once the cup reached the brim, but the hand kept pouring. Slowly, the tea began to spill over, dripping down the side of the cup, spreading across the table, soaking the papers beneath it. "Master!" Arjun exclaimed, jumping up to grab the teapot. "It's full. No more can go in. Look, it's wasting everywhere." The old man's lips curved into the faintest smile. He placed the teapot down with steady hands and looked directly into Arjun's restless eyes. "Exactly," he said in a calm, even tone. "This cup is your mind." Arjun froze, his breath caught in his chest. "It is already overflowing," the mentor continued, gesturing gently toward the dripping tea, "with doubts, with fears, with worries about tomorrow and regrets about yesterday. You try to force more in, more knowledge, more plans, more effort, but there is no space. Nothing new can stay. It only spills, just like this tea." Arjun's face flushed with shame. He lowered his gaze to the wet papers on the desk, words blurring where the tea had seeped through the ink. He wanted to argue, to say he was simply trying harder, that he couldn't afford to slow down, but the truth was undeniable. His mind felt exactly like that overflowing cup, noisy, restless, crowded, and unable to hold a single drop more. The mentor leaned closer, his voice soft but firm. "If you wish to learn, if you wish to grow stronger, you must first empty your mind. Create space for wisdom to enter. Only then will the lesson stay." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The dripping tea slowed, forming a small golden pool on the table. Arjun stared at it, the reflection of the lamplight flickering in the liquid. His shoulders dropped, and for the first time in weeks, he exhaled a deep, steady breath. The metaphor was clear, and it pierced through the fog in his thoughts. He realized that all this time, he had been piling up noise inside his head, leaving no room for clarity. His mentor reached for his own cup, lifted it gently, and sipped. The quiet act seemed to say more than words ever could. Arjun sat back down slowly, watching, listening, not to the storm in his mind, but to the stillness of the moment. That night, long after his mentor had left, Arjun sat alone in his small room. The scattered papers lay around him, some still stained with tea, but he did not rush to rewrite them. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't in a hurry. The old man's words echoed in his mind, "Empty your mind. Create space for wisdom to enter." He repeated them silently, almost like a chant, until the weight of his restless thoughts began to feel distant. Arjun found an old notebook tucked at the back of his shelf, one he had once used for practice essays but had abandoned halfway. Its pages were still mostly blank. He opened it slowly, and instead of writing lessons or notes, he began to list his worries. Line after line, he poured out every fear that had been gnawing at him. "I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of disappointing my family. I'm afraid I'm not smart enough. I'm afraid I'll waste years trying and still not succeed." His pen scratched across the paper furiously, filling pages with the dark ink of his inner storms. When he finished, he stared at the long list. It was ugly, yet strangely liberating. He realized how much of his mind had been trapped in these thoughts. Without hesitation, he tore the pages out, one by one. The ripping sound echoed in the quiet room, each tear breaking another chain. He crumpled the sheets, then ripped them smaller, until the floor around him was littered with pieces of paper that no longer held power over him. He felt lighter, as though space had been carved out inside him. He sat cross-legged, the scraps of paper scattered like fallen petals around him. The candle on his desk flickered gently, its flame swaying as if in rhythm with his breath. For the first time, Arjun noticed how deeply he was breathing, not shallow gasps of stress, but full, slow breaths that expanded his chest and released with ease. His mind, usually so noisy, began to settle into silence. Closing his eyes, he rested his palms on his knees. Thoughts tried to rise. What about tomorrow's exam? What if I forget again? But instead of chasing them, he let them drift away, as though they were clouds passing across an open sky. In the quiet, he discovered something surprising. Beneath the noise, beneath the panic, there was calm. A strength he had never noticed before sat quietly at the core of his being, waiting for him to uncover it. Hours passed like minutes. When Arjun finally opened his eyes, the candle had burned low, and the first faint glow of dawn touched the edge of his window. The night had disappeared without him realizing it. He rose slowly, stretching his arms, and looked at the scraps of paper scattered on the floor. He did not feel regret for destroying them, instead, he felt gratitude. They had carried his fears, and now they were gone. He stepped to the window and pushed it open. The cool morning air brushed against his face, carrying with it the sound of birds waking the day. The horizon was painted with streaks of soft gold and pink, and the rising sun seemed to whisper a promise of renewal. Arjun closed his eyes again, inhaled deeply, and felt clarity rush through him like fresh water into an empty cup. When he returned to his desk, the same books and notes sat waiting for him, but they no longer seemed like enemies. He picked up a pen, opened a fresh page, and began to work. The words flowed more smoothly this time, not forced, not desperate, but natural. His hand moved with steady rhythm, and he found himself understanding things he had struggled with just the day before. It wasn't that the material had changed, it was that he had changed. His mind, once crowded and restless, was now open, calm, and ready to receive. He smiled quietly, a smile not of victory but of peace. He realized now that strength wasn't about filling himself endlessly with more knowledge or pushing himself harder than anyone else. True strength came from knowing when to let go, when to clear the clutter, when to make space for wisdom to grow. The overflowing cup no longer defined him, he was the empty vessel, ready to be filled with clarity and purpose. As the sunlight filled the room, Arjun whispered softly to himself, "Empty your mind, and the world will find its way in." And with that, his journey forward began, lighter, freer, and infinitely stronger.